Hi guys, it's Leslie of Leslie Writes It All with one last holiday painting tutorial for you. And as usual, I'll be starting with the supplies that we'll be using, starting with this Aquafine watercolor palette from Daler-Rowney. I am showing you the travel size, but I'll be using the full size palette, which has the same colors. And for the paper, we'll be using Strathmore's 8x10 ready cut watercolor paper in cold press. And our brushes are Princeton Round Velvet Touch in size 3 and size 8. So I'm just going to jump right in, but I do want you guys to get practice if you are unfamiliar with painting trees. I'm doing a very loose whimsical style for these trees, and I'm keeping it in a very bright and colorful rainbow ombre effect. It's going to go from, and I've explained this before, the easiest way to do rainbow is to just do it the way you learned it in grade school, which is in Roy G. Biv. So I'll be starting with my reds and my pinks, working down to oranges and yellows, and from there we're going to go green, blue, into purples. So that's the easiest way for me to remember, and it's the best way for your colors to look cohesive as you're transitioning. And this is kind of my Bob Ross moment where I get to show you guys how to paint happy little trees, less detailed in a more loose style with watercolor. But basically it's just a series of these really short brush strokes with the larger brush pen. Brush. This is a watercolor brush in a size 8, and so you're just doing these really short strokes and changing up the color. So this is more of an exercise in color than it really is in painting, because you're only doing kind of one painting technique here. It's kind of a cone shape top for the tree, and then these just short strokes that are going to mimic the branches coming off of a pine tree or a Christmas tree. And as you're painting these trees, it's important to keep an eye out for the negative space. So the negative space is just as important as where you're putting the color down. A negative space is where there's an absence of paint. So anywhere that you see white paper, that's the negative space. And it's important to show the different layers between the trees, and you're going to create the illusion of different branches by leaving white space in between some of your strokes. And I am varying the starting height and the size of the trees so that you get visually some different things to look at. So this one I'm starting a little bit higher and making the color a little bit richer in that red color, because again, we're following that Roy G. Biv. So a little more red towards the top, and then as you're coming down towards the center, it's going to get a little bit more orangey and yellow. And then after we're done with these trees, we'll transition to the cooler colors. And each layer actually flares out a little bit so that you can see they're not straight strokes. The ones in the center of the tree tend to be coming straight down, and then the ones on the ends are flared out a little bit. And like I said, this is an exercise in color, so let your colors blend into each other. See how they look when you have them next to each other. I love the parts where like the top of the tree touches the next layer and it bleeds a little bit into it, and I love seeing watercolor interact in that way. So play with the colors, and this will familiarize you a little bit with the palette as well if this is a brand new palette for you. And what I want to achieve with this series is showing you that, you know, painting doesn't have to be very technical or very difficult. Like as you see, this is kind of just scribbling but in paint form. You know, you're creating these zigzag lines, and it's going to come together to create this really cool effect, but it's not technically very difficult. So I'm hoping that if there are any beginners out there, that this series will help you actually give painting a try. And as you're choosing your next colors, I do like to kind of cohesively tie everything together by incorporating some of the colors that I already used. So the colors that I like, the yellows that I already used, I'm blending it back into the greens to create that light green color, and then I'm blending that green in with a little bit of blue to get that subsequent color, so that in terms of your colors, they're kind of in the same family, and that makes it go really well together as a whole piece later on. when I say we're varying the size, change up the heights of the trees, but also change up like how wide some of them will be. You can have a tall and skinny one, a shorter one. They don't have to always have 4 layers. The smaller trees can have 3. It's just really a very loose style, which is easy for people who are, just learning, because it gives you a lot of flexibility and leeway in terms of making mistakes and kind of exploring if you haven't really done any painting before. And the thing I really love about this Daler Rowney Aquafine set is how beautifully vibrant the colors are, but you still get that really great translucent quality of a really high quality watercolor. So as you're painting, you can create so many different kinds of combinations of colors. I went with a very bright scheme, but if you were feeling like you wanted to create something a little moodier, you could incorporate a little bit of Payne's gray into each color, and that'll give you kind of a different feel. I wanted very bright, a little pastel, and definitely like you get rainbow vibes from this. So I went with mostly the true colors as they are, and then I mixed them with each other. So I kind of tried to incorporate a little bit of that top layer with that second layer. I just added a darker, deeper shade of blue into there. And then I'll just mix a little bit of that blue with some of that purple to get a bluish purple for that following layer. And that's how you tie your colors in together. But this palette comes with so many beautiful colors that it's really easy to do. I guess there's something we said about, fine art supplies versus like beginner quality art supplies. Some of the things that I've noticed is that, yes, it may be a little bit more expensive, but you're really paying for a difference in quality. So if you're using paints that are, on the less expensive side, you won't get these blends as well, or the colors will be a little murky and they won't be as like clear and bright. So, you get what you pay for. And I honestly, when I was beginning, I didn't want to invest in higher quality supplies, but it really makes a difference. So if this is something that you really want to develop a skill for, I think that having really good brushes, really good paper, and really good watercolors will make a huge difference. And I kind of freestyled it, but I knew I wanted to leave a message on the bottom. Like I mentioned in the previous lessons, these paintings would make a really cute, sweet gift. Also some great home decor. So you can gift this as well by putting a family name on the bottom. Welcome to the home of, or, oh Christmas tree was also a saying that I toyed with. But I wanted to write home for the holidays, and I did that with my pencil first. And I'm now using a kneaded eraser, which is a great, wonderful tool for watercoloring, to lift most of that pencil off. So it is visible to me while I'm painting, and it acts as a guide as I'm painting, but in the final piece and on this video, it's very difficult to see that. But I love that the kneaded eraser kind of lets you hide the fact that you sketched it out ahead of time. And I'll be doing some brush calligraphy here for the first word. So you'll notice that I'm trying to keep my downstrokes a little bit thicker than the upstrokes, which is right there. I try to keep it fine. So you want to use very light pressure when you're painting your upstrokes, and then more pressure, so push down on the paintbrush itself so that more of that brush makes contact with the paper as you're doing this calligraphy. And I'll show it again with the M. You'll see that coming down this stroke is going to be a thick line, and then now a thin line moving up, down is going to transition to a thicker line, and you're going to start again with the very thin upstroke, and then the darker thicker downstroke. And for the rest of the words, I'm just going to use the size 3 brush for this. I used the size 3 brush earlier too, but the great thing about round brushes is you can get a lot of fine details, but you also can get some thicker strokes with that. So a round brush is very versatile, and if you're going to get any brush, get a round brush for watercoloring. As you can see, I obviously pulled too much water onto my brush when I'm lettering. So you want to have very little water, and that's going to let you have the very, very fine detailed strokes for this lettering. So very little water on your brush, and if you pull too much water, obviously keep some paper towels close by so that you can lift some of that excess water off. And I'll say this lettering part is probably the hardest part of this project because it does require you to be pretty precise. The trees have that very loose style where you're just kind of doing this zigzag motion, but here you're actually having to write down tiny letters. So if you are not ready to write in very small, very detailed, just choose maybe a larger and shorter phrase. Or save a larger area for your lettering. I just saved this tiny little corner, so I'm working with what I got. So when you're doing lettering like this, you want just the very tip of your brush to touch the paper, and that's going to require a very gentle touch and very short strokes and just a lot of patience. So you can see the S, the curvature of that very tiny S. Just I messed that up, but I did want to show you errors so that you know how to fix it when it happens to you. So try to dot out that paint as soon as you can with a wet paper towel, and then with a clean paper towel and clean water, you're going to go ahead and dip that in and then try to just smudge it out. And don't attempt repainting it until that has completely dried. If your paper is wet, that excess paint that you put on will just smudge and kind of bleed out. So you want to make sure your paper is entirely dry before you attempt to fix it. And at this point, you can be done with your piece if you're happy with it. You can choose to add in smaller trees to fill out the space, or you can add on excess decorations like I am doing. I'm just adding tiny little stars to the top of each tree. Just in case anyone wasn't clear that it's a Christmas tree, I'm going to put a matching star on the top. So whatever color is on that top of the tree, I'm kind of just choosing a corresponding and matching color to go on top of that. And other ideas that I toyed with but ultimately chose not to do was you can choose to add stems, or not stems, I'm sorry, a trunk to the end of the bottoms of each tree. I toyed with the idea of making it like a metallic gold, or just consistent with the color motif as we had it. But in the end, I chose to just leave them kind of like floating trees. You can also add, ornaments or baubles to each tree. I decided to kind of, I'll show you in a little bit, dot it with a little bit of like snow, just to kind of add a little bit of extra to it. I'm just going over these trees with a little bit of that white paint just to add a little bit of splatter. You can choose to dot in like I'm doing, or like wet your pen a little bit and create some splatter, and that just kind of creates some fun detailings on the tree. And this is pretty much it for how I'm going to be decorating these trees. You can feel free to go as ornate or as simple as you'd like, but the beauty of having this watercolor paper cut to an 8x10 size is that now it's perfect for framing. So if you have an entryway that you'd like to decorate with some artwork, this is some like really great paper to do that with. It frames beautifully, and you have things that you can leave to welcome your guests. And that's pretty much it for this tutorial. I hope you guys got something from this project, and I hope to see some of you guys painting little happy rainbow trees. So if you do, please tag me. I'd love to see your artwork, and if you have any questions, just let me know.